our first goal was to make sure that this was viable in terms of having the right teachers, teachers who were happy to do this and who were eager to help. And our second big objective was then to produce online materials that would not simply be lectures, that would not simply provide a kind of passive learning or information for students to absorb. So early on, Rob and I decided to create short videos that would constitute the online instruction, and that in each of these short videos we would be setting the students some kind of problem or task that then they would then need to write about. In fact, we decided early on that students should do some online writing several times per week before they even got to the classroom. And the idea was that this online writing would prepare them much better to have good discussions in the classroom about the concepts that they were learning about and the texts that they were reading.
The idea of a blended course is sort of exciting to me because it takes some of the things that we usually take up the entire classroom with. And a lot of traditional classroom courses, the instructor's talking 80, 90, 100% of the time, and the students are just sitting there passively. And so I thought we could take a lot of that and put that in an online environment and save our classroom time to more active discussion. Pat's doing most of the lecturing, and the value of what he's doing is he's not sitting there and telling them everything that they need to know about this text so that they really don't have to read the text, which is what I think a lot of lecturing is. I've heard a lot of professors here at South say that students don't read, so I have to teach them the textbook. Well, if all you do in your video is give people reading strategies for how to make sense out of this text, then there's no value to that whatsoever unless they then go read that text. And a lot of their grade is based on what they write and then what they bring to class prepared to talk about and then what they understand about the text through that process, not through Pat or myself or another instructor teaching the classroom telling them what something means and what they're supposed to know. It's all about a generation of meaning. I think that's not a discipline-specific activity. I think it's really something where all learning is a generation of meaning. All learning is a form of writing.
I'll give you an example. One of the first texts the students read was a captivity narrative by Mary Rowlandson from 17th century Massachusetts. And there were certain theological concepts that were very important to Puritan writers. So in one of the early lectures of the course, I simply explained as briefly and concisely as I could what those two of those concepts were, and then asked the students to turn off the video and begin reading the text, to read about half of the text, looking for examples of or illustrations of those concepts as they operate in the text, and then to write about them, cite portions of the text demonstrating the operation of that concept in the text. The point was just to get them to direct their reading, not to provide a reading for them, but to, and also not to just cast them in with no help at all, but to direct their reading, to show them what things they should be looking for, but trust that they could find those on their own.
We made the decision pretty early that what we should do, because so many of the videos are asking for them to write, and we thought it would be more effective if they're writing for each other rather than just writing for themselves or writing for us, that we place the embedded video on a page with a threaded discussion. And I've been overwhelmed. You know, we're in the middle of our third week of them doing this, and it is 5 screens long. You know, there's so much, not just big long posts from each student, but the interaction between the students. Every time I log in, I'm just amazed at how much writing is going on. And, you know, it almost worries me that, you know, how am I going to fail somebody in this class when they're all working this hard? Because it's really been impressive. Whether that is sustained for 15 weeks, we'll see. But right now, the early returns are extremely encouraging.
I have a clearer sense now of the course as an interactive exchange between me and the students, even though I'm never meeting the students, than I had with the way that I used to teach it. It used to be, for instance, that I would ask questions of the students, and I would sometimes give them a couple of minutes to think about it and maybe even write down their answers. But more often than not, I would only get to sample a few of the students' responses to a given question. And, you know, the nature of many classes is that a few students are much more comfortable speakers than others, and they tend to dominate the class discussion. And from my dropping into the threaded discussions that Rob has been conducting and Amanda Odom in her class, I can see that all of the students are participating, and far more of them have interesting things to say about the questions that I'm posing and the text that they're reading than ever seemed to be the case in a given section that I taught. So that's been really exciting.
Pat so far has done most of the lectures in the course, but when other people have lectured, we're interviewing people. I'm tempted to maybe try that with Pat. It takes more editing to do it that way, but I also think it has the potential to create a more engaging presentation. When I was working at UAB about 5 years ago, Michelle Korf, who was the executive producer of a lot of the WGBH documentaries on PBS that were produced out of Boston, and she came to work at UAB. And so I would talk to her about filmmaking and documentary filmmaking and things like that. And she said something that will probably stick with me for the rest of my life, saying that there is nothing more exciting on film than to watch an intelligent person think. And so when you ask somebody a question that makes them sort of thoughtfully and creatively in the moment answer that question, it is a very exciting thing to watch because it gives us something to emulate. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about here in Petal a lot, one of the things that we talk about in our teaching discussions, and we complain about students not being able to think, and we talk about ways to teach them to think. Modeling that activity and the value of that activity is, I think, one of the best things we could possibly do.